You have to wonder, what has the Walt Disney Company been thinking the last 10 years or so since coming out with new Disney-branded Star Wars content? The Acolyte just makes us ask the same question yet again. And after this show has been promoted for the last couple of years, primarily as being one of diversity and representation. In fact, this was touted from the very beginning as being the most diverse and representative and inclusive Star Wars show that we'd ever see. Well, you'd be forgiven for thinking maybe they forgot about things like story and character development and actually, being entertaining, something that has plagued this show in its first 2 episodes that dropped last week. 4.8 million views in the first 24 hours, frankly, isn't all that much to brag about when you understand that that's a global figure, with Disney's nearly 150 million worldwide subscribers in dozens of different international territories. That's a drop in the bucket compared to other big hit shows that cost around $200 or so million. Things like Stranger Things, or how about House of the Dragon? Now, Disney's going to keep trying to gaslight on this one, but we know better. The fact is that people just simply aren't all that interested in it. And the few that did start watching it to begin with are probably going to get smaller and smaller as the weeks go on. But nothing, according to some, is going to prepare audiences for what's about to happen in episode 3. Renegade Online.
But it was screaming. But anyway, this was what we were looking at here. The 4.8 million views, like we talked about. And again, they don't really tell you, apart from, we just took total watch time available and divided it into how many minutes were consumed. There could have been 15 million people, for all we know, that tuned in Tuesday night to check this show out and then turned it off halfway through. That could also be the case, but that's not what Disney reports. Which would be even worse, which would be way worse if they had, it's obviously not everybody is sticking through this, as boring as this thing has been, because that was one of the articles that came, and there was a lot of them. This was from New York Magazine, if you want a little bit of a laugh.
Look at the subtext, the subhead.
Yes, lesbian space witches. Y'all think we're lying about this. Even New York...
Point. I mean, it doesn't get more snarky than that.
No, it doesn't. And if you don't have to read everything in here because it's too long. You just have to read some of the subtitles and the subheadlines in here. Maybe space witches are actually cool. Except they're not in Star Wars.
They're like, look, Firefly did Space Cowboy. People like that. Maybe space witches can work. Sorry, I don't think it will.
Yeah. Now, they talk about here, the series introduces a sect of female Force users, one of whom is played by Jodie Turner-Smith. That is the African-American woman with the shaved head. Y'all saw we played the clip of her at the Star Wars celebration last year, talking about my character is a very powerful female Force user. And then you hear, woo, in the audience. She's like, yes. That's Jodie Turner-Smith. She is going to be the leader of this lesbian space witch coven, as New York Magazine points out. And they make babies without men. You don't need men in Star Wars anymore. Is what this series is. If there's one message to take away from this, and some people out there think, oh, you're just being hyperbolic. Oh, you're being an istinophobe. No, believe what they tell you. Look at all the press junkets. Look at all the interviews they've done. Look at how this show has been promoted and talked about for the last 3 years since it's been discussed. They are trying to run the last of the men out of Star Wars. That's the end of it. And people are telling me, oh, there was a white male in there. There was 2 of them. I'm like, you mean the idiot that just... OSHA walks in and says, you made me upset. I'd like you to drink this poison and kill yourself. And he does. That's how Master Torben dies. It was the stupidest thing. There was no setup.
You don't spend any time with the character to actually make something like that meaningful. And yes, there is loath as I am to notice that type of stuff. I think it was 19 minutes into the show when there was the buffoonish when there's the buffoonish prisoners. That was the first time you saw them.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, that the everything was a plot contrivance and a convenience. I mean, everything was too easy. Every moment they could have set up, and this is why the writing was bad, apart from the dialogue being terrible. The first line of this show is the Amanda Stenberg, May, the evil twin, walking in to another cantina, surprise, another bar room in a Star Wars show on a sandy planet. Like, they cannot figure out anything different. She walks in, she walks up to Master Indara, who's played by Carrie-Anne Moss from The Matrix, Trinity, and she's sitting at the table. She walks up to her and she says, "We have unfinished business. Attack me with all your strength." I'm like, that's the first line of the show. Like, people would make jokes about how bad George Lucas was at writing dialogue. This was straight awful. This wasn't even campy. This was just stupid. It had no impact, and Master Indara, who should have wiped the floor with this chick, she dies because she throws a letter opener at her and hits her in the chest, and that's the end.
Couldn't afford Carrie-Anne Moss, even with that $180 million budget.
Well, I guess she's going to be in some flashbacks, which we'll see in episode 3, because episode 3 that's coming out this Tuesday with all the crazy stuff in it that's on here, that's going to be a lot of flashbacks, so we're going to see Carrie-Anne Moss.
But how could you care about the character? You already know she's going to die from a letter opener wound.
Well, that's just it. And they didn't even set it up well. Like, we're not even interested to know what happened before this, because the stuff going on in present day in the show is so boring and so contrived, and my camera's overheating again.
It doesn't like the show either. Your camera doesn't like the show either.
No, it doesn't. It's, this room gets a little warm, and it's up against that garage wall, and it picks up a lot of heat from that. I've got to get a ventilation system behind it, because that's part of it always happens in the summertime as it warms up. But anyway, there's so many moments in the show, Brett, where it's like, okay, we're going to make you think that maybe OSHA really is the killer, and this is a clever deception, and then they completely, they diffuse the situation like 3 seconds later. Somebody else comes in, "Oh, no, it's not her. No, it's fine. No, I saw her. She did something." It's like, there's no mystery. This is supposed to be a murder mystery, and there's nothing that's keeping you there.
It's really funny because one of the things that the Rolling Stone article criticized was Lee Jung-jae's vocal performance. I think he's the only one who actually managed to deliver any dialogue that sounded like it had anything behind it. I didn't criticize almost anything to do with lore or any of that, because I am not a big Star Wars guy. What I am a fan of is fantastic performances, and every actor sounded like every line they delivered was a first take, and then they just moved on to shoot the next scene. It was very, very jarring how little there was behind any of the performances. And what it feels like is, for every young actor, they sound like somebody who's in their 20s, who knows what Star Wars is, trying to deliver a line that belongs in Star Wars, rather than actual actors performing something that exists in a specific universe.
No, I think you're right. And that's the biggest problem with it. I agree. It's like, people were saying, everybody's being racist against Lee Jung-jae. I'm like, no, literally nobody is.
The only good part in the whole thing.
Exactly. He's the only person that seems to have any gravitas in the entire show.
Well, like none of the characters, like one of the things we used to talk about this a fair amount is, like, there was a picture that was going viral on Twitter this week of it wasn't John Wayne, it was like when he was 23. And he just looks older because, you aged quicker back then. The problem with doing a story like this is all the actors look young. They look young and they feel young. So they don't actually manage to pull off anything that feels as if they've lived any type of struggle or strife. And it's very hard for an audience to connect with people. And I think Charlie Barnett, the actor Charlie Barnett, might be the worst case of this. There's nothing to him. I said it seems like Star Wars Divergent or Star Wars.
Let me remind everybody, Brett, real quick, who Charlie Barnett is.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
That guy.
Yeah, like there's nothing behind the performances. So how do you buy into something when they all feel like children who have never actually lived a life?
No, it's lame. But look, let me finish reading this paragraph, because this is all you need to know with who this show is built for. The series introduces a sect of female Force users, one played by Jodie Turner-Smith, who have their own interpretation of their powers and a conflict with the Jedi. Witches have cropped up in the Clone Wars, so this is a Dave Filoni thing. This is why they set this up with the witches in Ahsoka, which came from the Clone. This is all Dave Filoni stuff, right? And games like Star Wars Galaxies, but now they get a fully developed backstory. We'll see how fully developed it really is, considering the rest of this series has basically no development. And the opportunity to provide an alternative narrative to the orthodoxy flowing from Coruscant. Meaning the Jedi Council. The Jedi bad. Women good. Even though there's plenty of women that are Jedi. That'll surely tick off fans who are dogmatic about the ways of the Force, but it makes sense in a vast galaxy, more than one or two if you count the Sith, schools of thought would develop around how to use those extrasensory powers. With an exclamation point. And this is not just a, this isn't a throwaway comment. New York Magazine says, escape the binary. There's a reason, because we're about to go trans in episode 3. Also, these witches bicker in Star Wars. This is in the Star Wars show, y'all. Episode 3 coming up. These witches bicker like they're involved in an extended Brooklyn queer commune, which is just delightful. This is Star Wars now, y'all. Ron.
I mean, what really could be more delightful? What is it that your Star Wars fan is looking for more than an extended Brooklyn queer commune?
Star Wars polycules. That's what will be next.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this. Let me tell you, the Wednesday live show is going to be fun when we break this down, and I will have the episode to where we can. I can't play it obviously, but we can kind of just scroll through a little bit, show some still images from it, and we'll make sure you see what we're talking about here this Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.